The webinar is now live. We're recording, and we will be back in 5 minutes with our featured presentation. Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca Tassitano, and I will be hosting the Smart Cycling 101 workshop presented today by the Friends of Osprey Trailhead Junction Trailhead Park. This will be a 45 to 50-minute presentation, after which our speakers will answer questions. You'll notice that on the Zoom dashboard at the bottom, you can see a Q&A icon. When you click on the Q&A icon, a box will appear, and it's here where you can type any questions that you might have. The questions will be answered later in the presentation around the 45-minute, 50-minute mark. Please note that everyone's mic is muted, so please do submit your questions by using the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. You can submit your question at any time, but it will be answered at the 45-minute, 50-minute mark. This session will be recorded and is available on YouTube. Go to ojtfriends.com and click on the YouTube icon in order to access this presentation later. That's ojtfriends.com. The Friends of Osprey Junction Trailhead Park wish to thank the Gulf Coast Community Foundation for their generous grant, which has made this webinar possible. You can learn more about this fine organization by visiting www.gulfcoast.org. We have two fabulous speakers today. Our first one is Bud Gauntz. He is the immediate past president of the Sarasota Manatee Bicycle Club, and he served as president for 5 years. Our second speaker is Ralph Monty. He'll be speaking first, and he directs all bicycling activities for Friends of Osprey Junction Trailhead. Let's give a warm virtual welcome to our first speaker, Ralph.
Thank you, Rebecca, and welcome everyone. Bud and I are happy to have you on board today. Here's what we'll be covering. A quick note, this session was created and developed by the League of American Bicyclists based in Washington, D.C. It was founded in 1880 when bicycles were first introduced into America and has since grown to be the nation's largest bicycle advocacy organization, with bicycle safety education as one of its primary missions. Hopefully it will answer the questions that brought you here today. And as Rebecca mentioned, send in your questions as we go along. We will address them during our Q&A after the presentation. So without further ado, let's get started. This research finding that cyclists fare best when they act and are treated as drivers of vehicles was introduced in 1976 by John Forrester, a groundbreaking bicycle advocate and transportation engineer who studied how motorists and bicyclists mesh in traffic. It's the foundation for this bicycle education workshop. It's also used as a guiding principle by transportation planners when they plan bike infrastructure designed for cyclists and motorists on the road. For us bicyclists, it means that the best way to bike safely is to simply drive your bike like you drive your car, by following the rules of the road and obeying traffic laws. In Florida, a bicycle is considered a vehicle and has all the rights of the road like a motorized vehicle. Keep this principle in mind as we go through the sections that talk about bicycling in traffic, lane positioning, and traffic laws. Many of these rules apply to private roads and trail riding too. In addition to obeying traffic laws, several other safety principles come into play. These include learning how to be visible, predictable, and assertive. All require good communication between you, the motorist, other bicyclists, and pedestrians. These apply to road and trail riding too. We will touch on these as we go through the presentation. But let's get started with some basics. Without question, the most important piece of equipment everyone should wear is a helmet. But a helmet's protection is only as good as its fit. If a cyclist is wearing his helmet too far back on his head, as we often see, sadly, he's exposing his forehead to severe injury. The proper way to fit a helmet is following these steps, especially paying attention to the 2-finger width test, which is step number 2. This measures the maximum width between your helmet's front edge and your eyebrows. With straps properly adjusted as shown, the helmet should be level and snug so that if you rock your head back and forth, it will stay in place. If you wish to have a PDF copy of this brochure to better fit your helmet, send me a note to my email, which will appear at the end of the presentation. One of the easiest ways to be visible on the road and on the trail is wearing high visibility clothing and having blinkers or lights, as this cyclist shows here. All of these separate you from the surrounding landscape day or night. Eye protection is recommended for safety reasons too. Shoes and sneakers are recommended over flip-flops, sandals, and open-toed shoes because those do not protect your feet and toes in the event of a crash. Padded gloves are similar to wearing equipment that protects your hands and fingers in the event of a crash as too. So it's a good idea to have a padded glove when you're riding your bicycle. If you're riding at night, be aware that Florida considers night riding any hour between sunset and sunrise. And it does require that you have a front white light that's visible from 500 feet. Also, you should have a red reflector and a red light that's visible from 600 feet from the rear. Both lights are permitted to flash. And as the cyclist in the illustration shows, it's a good idea to also wear a reflective safety vest. Some other reflection ideas that you might think about is using a reflective ankle straps, reflective tape on your helmet, and your bike frame. Anything to draw attention to the fact that you're on the road. It's good practice to carry a toolkit and to learn how to fix a flat. You can go on YouTube to look at how to fix a flat by going to Park Tools, P-A-R-K tool.com to get a good primer on how to fix a flat. You can practice fixing a flat at home. Here are the tools you'll need. The duct tape that's on the CO2 cartridge can also be used for any tire slash or other fixes like securing a broken spoke. But at minimum, you should have a toolkit that has a spare tube, a multi-tool, tire levers, CO2 cartridges, an inflator, a hand pump. All of these will help you fix the flat. In the event that you have a mechanical failure, you should know that AAA, if you are a member of AAA, will pick you up if you have a mechanical failure on your bike. It counts against your allotted roadside assistance plan. And you should know that there are other states that are serviced too in case you're riding in other states. For complete information, go to AAA.com/bicycle to learn more about this great program for bicyclists. Some other recommended items that you should have appear here. They range everything from having a cell phone and bell to Band-Aids and driver's license. One particular item I'd like to draw attention to is the road ID for people that are not aware of what they are. That is a cloth or rubberized bracelet that you wear on your wrist that EMTs are aware of noting in the event of a bike crash, and it carries your full information. You can go to roadid.com to get more information on this valuable piece of equipment that you should wear. It's good practice to do this, what's called ABC Quick Check, and it's a pre-ride checklist before every ride. It takes less than a minute and catches any mechanical issue your bike might have before you take off. The ABC Quick Check is an acronym for A, which is for air. So you want to make sure that you have your tires inflated to the recommended inflation PSI on your tires sidewall. B is for brakes. You want to check that your brakes are accurately hitting the wheel side of your wheel, and that there should be a thumb distance between the brake levers and handlebars if you squeeze the brake. If you do squeeze your brake levers and they are hitting your handlebars, it's time for an adjustment to the brake, and I would recommend that you go to the bike shop to get those adjusted. C is for cranks, chains, and cassette. You want to make sure there are no debris on the cranks, any rusty links on your chain, or any debris on your cassette. Just for those that are uninitiated, the cranks are the gears that are up front, and the cassette are the gears that are in the back. And finally, you have on your bike, most bikes have what's called a quick release lever. Those are the levers that attach your wheel, front and back, onto the frame of your bike. You want to make sure that those are tightened, as well as make sure that your seat lever is tightened too. This will all assure that you have checked out your bike before you go for a ride. National surveys show that 50% of all bicycle crashes are caused by falls. 17% are car-bike collisions, 17% are bike-on-bike collisions, 8% are dog-bike crashes, and 8% are other types of crashes, such as pedestrian crashes. The good news is crash rates decrease with rider experience and education. So the more that you learn about how to ride your bike safely, the less apt you are to be involved in a crash. The data also shows that 50% of car-bike crashes, which is represented by that green segment, is caused by the bicyclist, usually by not obeying traffic laws. So by riding safer and smarter, you'll reduce the risk of a crash with a car. Additionally, by learning and recognizing road or trail hazards that will cause a fall, as we will go through today, you'll notice the risk of a self-induced fall, you'll reduce the risk of a self-induced fall, which is in the 50% category. Because bicyclists are slower moving vehicles, it's best practice to ride on the right. But sometimes that may not be possible if you don't have what's called a safe and reasonable road surface ahead. That's called riding on the right as practicable. It's important that if you do have to take the lane, as this cyclist is doing here, that you check and signal before you do that. And you control the lane so that you can get around the unreasonable road surface that might be laying ahead. This might be counterintuitive, but when you do ride on the right, you want to avoid riding all the way over to the edge or curb, as some beginner cyclists do. This forces you, if you're way over to the edge or curb, to deal with road edge surface hazards. There are more safety benefits. There are also safety benefits of getting off the right edge of the road. That includes being more visible to traffic on all sides, prevents oncoming traffic or following motorists from turning directly in front of you, and you'll create a safety cushion to your right. You'll also, as we'll discuss later on, have more clearance adjacent to the parked cars that you might be passing as you go on the road. Florida has what's called a 3-foot separation law when sharing the road between a bicyclist and motorist. The question is, what's shareable? Generally, that would be enough space for a motorist and a cyclist to ride side by side. The other issue is whether a road is narrow. Bicyclists are allowed to move into the lane if the road is deemed narrow. FDOT, which is the Florida Department of Transportation, deems a narrow road as any road that's less than 14 feet. So with that in mind, we're going to have a quick pop quiz. Looking at this photo here, and I'd like for you to imagine the motorist coming upon these two cyclists. And my question to everyone out there is, which cyclist was riding or is riding improperly right now? So if I can ask you all to begin voting on which cyclist is riding improperly, that would be great. We'll take a minute for you to vote. Okay, so we're going to end the poll. 70%, 78% said cyclists in the foreground, and 22% said cycling out front. Well, the answer is that the 78% is correct. The cyclist in the foreground here, as the motorist was approaching, is in the wrong position, because by his being all the way over to the right, he's subliminally inviting that motorist to pass, thereby putting his partner in harm's way. Let me show you another section. Let me show you another illustration that'll show that to be so. This is a cyclist that's riding in a 12-foot lane, which again is narrow according to Florida standards. It should be 14 feet. This particular cyclist is causing less clearance between himself and the car because he's not taking the lane. The better position for him to be is this position, whereby he is in the middle of the lane. He has taken the lane, which has made the motorist pass him on the adjacent lane, which the law allows. So the correct position is take the lane in the middle of the lane if it's a narrow road. To put this in context, just to go back to the slide before, if you are on a road that's 12-foot lane, for those of you that know the Legacy Trail, which measures 12 foot in length, think about riding along the Legacy Trail with a car next to you at 12 feet. That is a scary proposition. It's better to be in front of the car and let them pass around you on the road than for you to be riding along the car as that previous illustration showed. The correct position in a shareable lane at 14 feet is what we show here, whereby the cyclist is about 2 feet off the curb and the adjacent motorist is 4 feet or 3.5 feet away from the cyclist. This is a shareable lane process that works well for both the cyclist and the motorist. We talk about be predictable, and it's important that you're predictable not only with other motorists, but with other cyclists and pedestrians. And these simple signals, such as the ones we show here, whereby going from left to right, if you're making a left turn, you put your hand straight out to the left. The two illustrations show making a right turn where you have your hand straight up, your left hand straight up, or your right hand out horizontally, shows a right hand signal. And finally, a stopping signal where your hand is straight down. A slowing signal would be straight down with a wave. So all of this is learning how to be predictable using good communication skills through hand signals. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Bud and give him control of the presentation, and he'll continue on with his segment of the presentation.
I want to say thanks, Ralph, and I would also like to extend my welcome to everyone. I will make one comment before we leave this slide that Ralph and I talk about from time to time, and that is we are so fortunate to live in Sarasota, and that climate encourages lots of visitors, and a lot of those folks are Europeans. And when they see the second from the left signal, the ones that we learned as kids about turning right, they have no idea what that signal is. So we are currently encouraging for the right turn, the third from the left signal, our illustration, which shows the arm straight out to the right. We want to let folks know where we're going. So just another safety tip for everyone, and to help out our European friends as well. I want to move on to the next screen, and let's see if they're going to let me do that. Ralph? Control. Okay, let me back up here. We had a little glitch in the program. Before I talk about this particular slide, I want you to remember back to a slide that Ralph had, and that was the #1 safety principle for cyclists, and that was that cyclists fare best when they act and are treated as drivers of vehicles. We, as cyclists, must act as drivers. We have the same rights and responsibilities as drivers. We obey the same laws as drivers. And with that in mind, we want to touch on 7 different principles of traffic law that pertain to cyclists. And the first is first come, first served. Cyclists who act as vehicles assume the right to be first, when indeed they are first, whether it be in a lane or at an intersection. #2. Never ride on the right, ride on the right, never ride against traffic. We talk a lot in the slides that follow this one about being in the rightmost lane that serves your destination. So you want to ride on the right. An example that you might think about would be that if you were in a 3-lane straightaway and you wanted to turn right, you would need to be in the right lane, not the center lane. And never, never ride against traffic. It's kind of like going down a one-way street the wrong way. Motorists are not expecting you. It is dangerous. Do not ride against traffic. Number 3, yield to crossing traffic, or as I like to say, stop at stop signs, stop at stoplights, yield, wait your turn, and proceed only when safe. Yield means to look until there is no traffic as a danger. Number 4, yield when changing lanes. Imagine that you're a motorist and you want to change lanes. We're taught to look over our shoulder to be sure no one is in our blind spot. We want to do the same thing as a cyclist. Looking over our shoulder, we refer to as scanning. So we want to scan, and that's what's going on at the very bottom of this slide. The cyclist is looking back over their left shoulder to see if there's anyone there. We then want to signal, which is what is happening in the middle of this slide. The cyclist has his left hand out indicating he wants to take the lane. He is only going to take the lane after he scans an additional time to be sure that that automobile is not too close for safety. So we only take the lane when safe. We always talk about the fact that as cyclists, we are anywhere from 125 pounds and up, and we are pulling in front of a vehicle which can be 2,000 pounds and more. So remember, scan and only move when safe. Speed positioning. Slower to the right, faster to the left. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The rules from right to left are parked cars, slow drivers, and fast drivers. Number 6, lane positioning. Ralph just talked about this. In this slide, we've got 2 examples. We have the 14-foot lane and the 11-foot lane. The 14-foot lane is wide enough to share with a motorist. The anything less than 14-foot lane, we need to control the lane as cyclists. We control for our safety, not to be road hogs. And number 7, I always enjoy this slide. It reminds me of all the Navy Blue Angels or the Air Force Thunderbirds. And that is that there are 3 different cyclists here going 3 different directions. The cyclist on the right in this photograph is where he needs to be. He's on the right-hand portion of the lane. He's going right. The cyclist in the center of the lane is going to cross the intersection and then move to his right. And the cyclist on the left, turning left, should be in that position to make the left turn. And as he crosses the intersection, he moves to his right. One thing about the left-hand turn and the right-hand turn is that you want to control the lane. You do not want to give a motorist the opportunity to try and squeeze you to either the right-hand side or the left-hand side. So control the lane as you are in the arc of your turn and then move to the side of the lane after you are going forward in the new lane. So we've talked about different principles of law, but now we need to talk about things that are particular, some other things that are particular to cyclists, and one of those is riding on the sidewalk. And I think the first one bullet point on this screen says it all, that yes, we can, but it is dangerous. In addition, you want to remember that motorists probably are not expecting to see you on the sidewalk, and that you as a cyclist on the sidewalk are secondary to the pedestrians. Pedestrians have the right of way, not the cyclist. One other item is the last bullet point mentions, and that is know the local laws. In some areas, you are not allowed to ride on the sidewalk. As cyclists, we have a novelty called bike lanes. And this is a great photo, and I want to take a second and talk about the photo. And that is that there are three distinct lanes here. From the right hand going to the left, we have first a right hand only turn lane. We have a bike lane, and then we have a vehicle lane. All right, going forward, vehicle lane. This cyclist is showing his intention to go straight ahead. He is in the bike lane going straight. Had the cyclist intended to turn right, he should not be in the bike lane. He should be over in the right turn only lane, and he should be controlling that lane as he makes that turn. Something new to the Sarasota Manatee area are SHAROs, shared lane markings. We've always had shared lanes, but these are shared lane markings. And this SHARO, the image on the asphalt, is normally also accompanied by a pole sign that says bikes may use the entire lane. In Florida, SHAROs are only on streets that are posted at 35 miles per hour or less. They are used on streets that have no bike lane, as in this instance. You can see that cars are parked on the curb. There is no bike lane. So you want to share by taking the lane in this instance, so that you can avoid being squeezed to the side, because this is a narrow street, and so that you can avoid pedestrians, or rather motorists, opening their doors into your path. So take the lane, be assertive, be safe. Something also relatively new to this area are two other types of bike lanes. One of those is a buffeted bike lane. This photo is similar to what you'll see on Harbor Drive in Venice, that runs from Venice Avenue south to Sorrento. In this situation, we have our nice wide bike lane. We have probably 4 to 5 feet of division between the cyclist and the car, marked off by the paint. You want to remember that this gives you more safety, but you also need to remember that that barrier, that buffer, is paint only. So you still need to be conscious of motorists at all times. And probably the gold standard of bike lanes would be the protected bike lane. Going from left to right in this photograph, we have a pedestrian only walkway. We have a bicycle only pathway, and it's marked for what I call north to south, cyclists or for cyclists going in opposite directions. We have cars parked at an angle, and then we have an open street and more cars parked. This is protected in that we as cyclists are not next to moving cars, nor are we exposed to cars having their passengers open doors into our pathway. I'm going to call this not quite the gold standard, maybe a silver standard of protected bike lanes, in that even though there's probably a curb for the cars here, that car could cross that curb and enter the bike lane. A truly protected gold standard bike lane would have a concrete barrier 3 feet or more between car and the bike lane. Cyclists also have the opportunity to use a multi-use trail. And the key word here is multi, as in cyclists, pedestrians, dogs, skaters, skateboarders, joggers, and here in Florida, the ubiquitous Florida gator. Yes, we've seen them on the Legacy Trail. And I think the first bullet point kind of nails it when it talks about the fact that multi-use trails can be more hazardous than the street. And one of those reasons is there are so many things going on the trail that we don't have going on the street. We also want to talk about courtesy, and we're going to have the Emily Post Rules of Etiquette here just in a moment. And a couple of those things are riding at speed, the posted speed, and the talk about intersections being the most dangerous points of the trail. Unique to multi-use trails are bollards, and this one is shown at the on the Legacy Trail, the junction between the trail and the Circus Bridge. They're well-meaning. This one is a little on the iffy side. You want to remember that bollards are there to remind us to stay on our side of the path. As cyclists, we always want to be on the right-hand side of the path. In this instance, experienced cyclists will tell you that your bike goes where you look. So be careful. Don't concentrate on the bollard, but look to the side of that same bollard when you're approaching it. A better, safer solution is this photo in front of the caboose on the trail. And this one shows flexible bollards that will give should you come in contact with them. And as promised, we have the trail etiquette tips. I want to just highlight them. Probably we all need to remember that we need to be courteous, yield to pedestrians. Pedestrians do have the right of way. We need to remember to call out anytime we're going to pass a pedestrian. I prefer to say good morning, good afternoon, so that we don't scare that pedestrian, and then let them know that I am going to pass them on the left. While I observe the posted speed limit, Legacy Trail is 15. Don't see a straight trail as a speedway and use it to see exactly how fast you can go. There are posted speed limits on trails, just like roads, for our safety and for the safety of the other users. Be predictable. Don't ride all over the trail. Ride on the right. And this Next bullet point, move off the trail anytime you stop. If you don't, you are encouraging an accident. But I personally was on the trail last week, had a couple stop unannounced in front of me. We avoided a collision with oncoming traffic just by being heads up. But the best way to avoid that possibility would be to move off the trail anytime you stop. Telephones. You should have one, as Ralph mentioned, in your pack. Your things to have on yourself when you cycle, but they are for emergency, not to be answered while you are riding. So leave them in your pocket, leave them in your bike bag while you're actively cycling. So we've talked about the challenges of dogs and pedestrians and skaters and other cyclists. But we as cyclists face and need to be aware of some other challenges when we're either on the road or on the trail. And the first of those, and probably one of the most concerning, is that of sun glare. Need to remember that the motorist is not expecting a cyclist to be on the road or on the bike lane when they are fighting sun glare. And to avoid the safety problems of being on the road when there is sun glare, you want to either alter your route or delay your start to avoid the glare being in either your eyes or in the eyes of the motorist. Dogs, man's best friend, or as a friend says, only when that dog is behind a fence. Dogs can be an issue. You want to have a plan of what you should do should there be a dog not on a leash who wants to be aggressive towards you. One of those things is to be aggressive, speak loudly, holler, stop, and be sure that you maintain control of your bike. Cracks, and we're not talking about the wise cracks from my friend Ralph when we're on the bike, but we're talking about actual cracks in the asphalt surface, longitudinal cracks. You've noticed, I'm sure, that bike tires are narrow, and a narrow tire stuck in a longitudinal crack is a recipe for a fall. So avoid cracks, both the ones in the road and the wise cracks from your friends. And rhyming with cracks is tracks, and railroad tracks in this case present another challenge, especially those that are angled. Well, be sure you cross in a 90-degree angle. Angled rails will catch your tire for sure. Wet rails are extremely dangerous in that it's like driving on ice. So remember to, as I said earlier, cross in a 90-degree angle, and when in doubt, walk your bike across the tracks. It's never wrong to dismount and walk your bike. So I'm going to turn it back to Ralph now.
Thank you, Bud. So I'm going to pick up on some more hazards of the road and trail. And one is sand, which is a hazard that you should note and avoid when you're riding, especially on turns or when you're stopping. Sand will cause you to skid or grab your front wheel. When seeing sand, slow down or dismount from your bike if it's a heavy patch as shown here. This is on the backside of the turn bridge on Minnesota Key Boulevard in a bike lane as you're coming to a stop. It's a heavy patch that can cause you to lose control. I'm just trying to get my control back. Okay. One other hazard that is insidious is side wind. Side wind is an invisible hazard that you may experience when you're riding over an overpass or a bridge. It's best to firmly grasp your handlebars if you get caught in a severe wind gust. If you're on a high traffic road, like this particular road here, that's trafficked with large trucks, be aware of side wind blasts that are caused by these trucks passing by you. Any surface that's wet is a hazard and can cause you to lose control of your bike. Avoid riding over any of these surfaces if they're wet or through puddles. The best way to handle a wet surface is to slow down, especially if you're getting caught into a rainstorm. And not only is everything wet, but visibility due to the rainstorm is being decreased. So it's important that you slow down anytime you see a wet surface. An uneven red edge on a road is a hazard if it appears on a road or a trail. And this particular hazard causes many bicycle injuries. The cause of the crash here is when the bicyclist tries to pull back onto the road or trail after he's moved off his line. Often the front tire gets caught on the road edge coming back onto the road. So if you find yourself going off the road, to avoid crashing, slow down and resist the urge of coming back on the road. Don't panic and slow down until you can safely get back onto the trail as opposed to pulling back immediately. We've already talked about riding on next to adjacent cars. A hazard here is what's called dooring. And that's when a person in a car opens his or her door into the path of a bicyclist. We talked about not riding too far edge to the right against adjacent cars. Again, these doors can open unexpectedly, so ride far enough away to safely avoid them. Some large SUVs have a wingspan door of about 5 feet, just to give you a context. So if you are riding in a bike lane adjacent to cars, you want to stay on the left edge of the bike lane as opposed to the right. Some other hazards to think about are wildlife, as Bud mentioned, alligator, but alligators don't move really fast enough to get you into trouble. What can get you into trouble is what I call the illogical squirrel. That's the squirrel that scampers across your path, and he or she is about 90% of the way across the road or trail and then comes right back into your path. So if you do see a squirrel or a rabbit, be aware that they create hazards and you can lose control if they hit your front wheel. Some other hazards are natural debris like tree branches, pine cones, and straw, any kind of street debris, fire hydrant street marker that's seemingly right on the line of where bicyclists ride, an invisible street depression that you might not see that can lose control, that makes you lose control of your wheel, and high shrubs and fences at intersections are things that can cause you to collide with a vehicle coming the opposite or cross way. Also, if you are on the road, you don't want to ride in the shadow of a high SUV or truck at intersections because crossing traffic coming from the left will not be able to see you. So slow down if you're going through an intersection and you're passing by a high SUV or truck on your left side. So the hazards, just to sum up all the hazards that Bud and I have talked about, are really more educational. We're not looking to scare anyone. I had an attendee take one of these classes, and she said to me half kiddingly that after learning about all the hazards, she's going to rethink about bicycling. But that's not the point of this. The point of it is that when we talked before and we looked at the pie chart, that 50% of falls, of crashes are falls. All of the hazards that we're pointing out today are the reasons why. So if you're aware of these and take note as you ride, you'll reduce the risk of a crash. I'd like to take a minute and just talk about e-bikes because we're finding that many people coming back into cycling are looking at e-bikes as a way to bicycle. It has become the fastest growing segment in bike sales, and there are three classes of e-bikes. There's this fuzziness about e-bikes, but it's really simplistic if you know the different classes. Class 1 is what's called pedal assist e-bike, and that one goes up to 20 miles an hour. So you do have to pedal for the motor to work to go up to 20 miles an hour. As Bud will tell you, and I will tell you, 20 miles an hour is a fast speed to go at any level of experience. And if you're just starting out, getting to 20 miles an hour could be quite dangerous. The class 3 e-bike is a pedal assist that goes up to 28 miles an hour. And again, now you're touching the lower limits of world-class speed, people that ride on the Tour de France. So rethink the idea of buying something that fast because it could prove to be dangerous for your skills. And finally, the e-bike that causes the most controversy is what's called throttle powered. Those are e-bikes that you don't need to pedal. You just work a paddle. You work the throttle most like you would a moped or motorcycle. Sarasota County this year is allowing pedal assist, the class 1 e-bike, the pedal assist to 20 miles an hour on their trail system. That was just enacted earlier this year. Prices for e-bikes range from anywhere from $1,000 to $6,000, and they're fun and they're getting people back on bikes. But the data also shows that there is a higher risk for serious injury when they compare it to traditional bikes. There's a data study, as I cite below, showing that through the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission. There's also a higher risk for more serious crashes with pedestrians. And they deemed it, the reason why that's so is that, number one, people who lack bike handling skills or inexperienced bicyclists are going at speeds that they can't handle. So if you are buying an e-bike or you already purchased one, be careful and work them at a speed that you're most comfortable and that your bike handling skills can handle. Finally, if you're on your bike, and we are sort of going through a cultural revolution here in the United States regarding bicyclists being on the road and motorists learning how to deal with bicyclists being on the road, it's important to be what I call a good bicycle ambassador and to promote mutual courtesy between yourself, the group that you're riding with, and other motorists. And that includes, number one, without question, being law-abiding, not going through red lights, not going through stop signs, yielding when necessary, etc. And you do want to be respectful, courteous, and cheerful as well to not only motorists, but also to pedestrians whom you might encounter on the trail. All of this gives us bicyclists a better image in the overall scheme of things. And I'd be remiss not to talk about some organizations that are promoting bicycling in our area. That includes the Friends of Osprey Junction Trailhead, the League of American Bicyclists, which does a lot of work nationally, getting funds for bicycle infrastructure for states to use around the country. We're blessed to have a very good state bicycle association called Florida Bike Association. FloridaBicycle.org is their website. I encourage you to take a look at that. There's a vast amount of resource material available there. And if you are looking to ride with other people, a terrific club is the one that Bud headed up for 5 years called Sarasota Manatee Bike Club. All of these are good ways to promote bicycling in the Sarasota County area. So without further ado, we came in just at the 50-minute mark. We'll have some questions. And Bud, I'm going to ask you a question if you don't mind, if you're online.
Go ahead, Ralph.
So we got a question from an anonymous attendee who says, are shareable lanes marked in Sarasota?
Yes, they are, but not as many as we need. The first one that comes to my mind is Gant Road, which is north of Clark. Let me back up and rephrase that. Gant Road runs parallel with 75. It's west of 75. When you turn onto Gant Road going north, you'll see the sharrows and the signs that say bikes may take full lane. That's the first one that comes to my mind. The county is trying to add more, but it's all about budget.
Right. And if I could add to that, I think also that any bike lane that has a sharrow in Sarasota would be deemed shareable. So things like Bay Street and Osprey and East Venice Avenue in Venice, if there's sharrows, then that's deemed a bike shareable lane. So let's move on. Joe asked, does anyone or any organization attempt to train the police departments in the proper laws for bicyclists and cars on the road? I know for a fact that they aren't properly trained. Well, I'll take that, Bud. I think there are a number of police departments as things have grown in the bicycle world, especially outside of around the country. Police departments are becoming more cognizant of learning the laws for bicyclists. So the League of American Bicyclists has a program called Bicycle Friendly Driver, where they're working with police departments around the country to teach police departments more about the rules of the road as it relates to bicyclists. So I think it's a slow part. We're in the nascent part of things, but I think things will get better.
Ralph, if I might add.
Go ahead.
Sarasota Manatee Bike Club recently sponsored a league coaching instructor class, which you were a part of. But this is a League of American Bicyclists class, and we had 2 police officers from Cape Coral come up and spend the weekend with us and pass the course. So I think more and more police departments are becoming aware of the need for their police officers on bikes to be cognizant of what the rules are, and to, as we taught our 2 friends from Cape Coral, to see it from the cyclist side as well as from the motorist or the officer side.
Okay. So Bob asks that, Bud, this morning a driver in my neighborhood failed to signal prior to a turn and then turned into my lane, almost striking me. The driver continued toward me like he didn't see me until I bailed out to the right. Should I have followed him home to clearly explain his error?
That would probably be the last option I would choose, and probably would be an option I would never choose. No, I don't believe you're going to educate the motorist by following him home and correcting his driving habits. We call this a right hook, and it is a very dangerous situation for cyclists, and one that you need to be aware of anytime that you come to an intersection that has an opportunity for anyone to make a right-hand turn, or for a car coming from the opposite direction, making a left-hand turn into your path. So, but again, no, do not follow that motorist home. And on that same era, or that same point, should a motorist at a stoplight or as they pass you, ask that you ask in a not friendly way or tell you that you should not be on the road, please do not try to engage them. We do not need road rage with cyclists.
Right. Okay. We got another question who's from an anonymous attendee. He's asking, or she's asking, the Legacy Trail has many areas of a large drop off to the ground. Is the county working to resolve this? Yes, they are. I can tell you that they started to work on that where they're trying to level off the Legacy Trail edge to the ground so that what we talked about before about falling off a trail and then pulling back and crashing, they are resolving that. They've been using a crushed shell type material to level off that trail, and hopefully they'll continue to do that as they go through. I know their focus right now has been on extending the trail, the county has, but in speaking with the recent county Legacy Trail people, they've advised me that project will be back soon, but they have done quite a bit of leveling off over the last year or so. But Teresa asks, any special advice for us recumbent tricycle bike riders? We rarely use the roads because of visibility.
Recumbent trikes, and for those of you who are not familiar with the term, refers to a bike that is or the rider is about 6 inches off the road. Normally 3-wheeled, sometimes 4, but normally 3-wheeled, and the cyclist is sitting almost on the ground. So they are hard to see. Normally we see trikes with flags in the air to try and help let the drivers behind know that they're there. I would also advise to be sure that you have good daylight lights on both the front and the back of your bike. Again, it's another way to alert drivers that you're there. And I would also encourage you to ride with groups because groups are always more visible than individual riders.
Yes, and if I could add to that as well, the lights, in my opinion, if I don't ride a recumbent, but if I did, I'd try to put a light on my most highest point, which would be my helmet. So I think having lights on the rear of my bike and on my helmet would be a good idea. And I often, in looking at and studying recumbents, I've noticed that flags are good, but they're very narrow. So maybe banners as well might be something that I would continue. We haven't talked about group riding, but I agree with Bud that if you are riding, that would be the way to go, is to ride with a group. Virginia mentions that she finds that golf cart riders often don't stop and give you your right of way. But how would you handle that?
You have to be a defensive rider. First and foremost, you have to be a defensive rider. And golf carts are kind of like the cyclist who does not look and yield. So it's up to you to be aware when you see a golf cart that golf cart may not realize how fast you're traveling, which we find to be quite the common thread sometimes. But you just have to be defensive and be ready to stop when you see a golf cart in the area.
Right. And last question, Anonymous wrote in, is what's the price differential? Why is there a price difference amongst helmets? Why are helmets priced at different price points? I'll answer that. Every helmet that's sold in the United States has to go through the Consumer Protection Agency, U.S. Consumer Price Agency. I'm sorry, the Consumer Protection Agency, which means every helmet, whether it's a $25 helmet or a $300 helmet, has to be as safe. The difference in helmets comes to what's called the venting, the holes that are in the helmet, the style, the retention system, which is how you adjust your helmet, as well as systems that are called MIPS and wave cell, which protect against concussions. So the more that you features the helmet have, the more that it's going to cost additional funds. However, every helmet, the $25 helmet that you'll find in a box store, and I don't recommend buying a helmet in a box store. It's better buying a helmet at a bike shop where a salesperson can help you fit. But if you do, that helmet is as deemed safe as a $300 helmet. So just food for thought on that. And with that, Rebecca, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
And I think we're all set.
Ralph, if I might add one more thing to helmets.
Sure.
Remember a couple of things. One is we're in Florida, so the inexpensive box store helmet does not have a lot of vents. Therefore, your head is going to be hot. Therefore, you are going to be less anxious or less willing to wear that hot helmet. So there is a good point to paying the extra money for a well-vented, ventilated helmet for Florida.
So noted.
Well, let's give both of our speakers a big round of applause. Virtual applause. That's about all the time we have for today. I just want to thank again our speakers, Ralph and Bud, for a very informative session. That was fabulous. Thank you to both of you. The Friends of Osprey Junction Trailhead Park continue our webinar series a week from today, next Wednesday, with a workshop titled A Plein Air Painter Art Exhibit and Critique. You won't want to miss that. The session is 1 hour and it's slated for next Wednesday, October 28th at 11 a.m. Visit www.ojtfriends.com/webinars in order to register and to find more information. All of the webinars have been fabulous. We want to thank you, our audience, for attending, and thank again our panelists. My name is Rebecca Tassitano. I'm representing the Friends of Osprey Junction Trailhead Park. We hope that you have a wonderful day. See you next time.